really started writing Lake Success when I realized that most of my friends had been exiled from Manhattan. And they couldn't afford anymore. And they were exiled to, to places like Berlin and LA and Abu Dhabi and Portland. You may have heard of it. And they've been replaced, the one in Oregon, not in Maine. And they were replaced mostly by people who worked in finance and allied trades. These were the only people really left in my zip code, so I decided to write about them. And Lake Success is, as we mentioned, the story of Barry Cohen. He runs a hedge fund called This Side of Capital. He's actually running it into the ground. He's also being investigated by the SEC, whoops. And he has a disastrous marriage to his wife, Seema, and an autistic son. So with both of his business and his family life in disarray in true male fashion, he decides to, flee. And he does it on a Greyhound bus for complicated romantic reasons. And the scene I'm going to read is set in Atlanta, where Barry gets off the bus and visits his protege, Jeff Park, whom he actually fired from his hedge fund at one point. And one last note, of course, as mentioned, Barry collects watches. I'm really sorry about that. He just does. It's too late to give him another hobby, but maybe for the paperback, it can be something else. Jeff Park's living room was as palatial as the entrance to a modest New York museum. Enormous golden lights hung from the ceiling, which was at least 20 feet high. Jeff had a full head of hair, gums that didn't recede, and he did push-ups in the middle of the day. He had gone to Cornell, if Barry remembered correctly, but had not played lacrosse like most of the guys at his firm. "So what's up?" Jeff said. "Just passing through, Barry? Decided to look me up?" They were sitting in Jeff's kitchen. He had brought out a bottle of Yamazaki 20-year and was serving it straight up, quite decadent for 1:27 p.m. What the hell did Jeff Park even do for a living anymore? He had cashed out of Barry's hedge fund with zero. "All of this is going to sound crazy," Barry said. "Uh-huh. I'm on a journey by bus." Barry knew that he would eventually have to explain his flight from New York to people in his tax bracket. He knew that news of his meltdown would immediately form the latest bulletin in the incestuous, bloodthirsty world from which he had sprung. But he doubted it would really surprise anyone. The people in his world could be nuts. One fund was essentially a cult with its own Bible, ritual mind control, and feats of strength. One fellow at another fund, a quant billionaire in training, played piano at a third-rate bar while passing around a tip jar. Like your first ankle monitor bracelet or your fourth divorce, the occasional break with reality was an important part of any hedge fund titan's biography. "The things I've seen," Barry said, and he told Jeff a few of his Greyhound adventures so far. Jeff Park seemed interested. He poured more drinks. "It sounds a little bit like you're doing a middle-aged version of On the Road," he said. That thing about the one-eyed Mexican guy in New Jersey who fell asleep on your shoulder, that's so Kerouac. "That's exactly right," Barry shouted. No wonder he had picked Jeff Park to host him. The man had literary sensibilities beyond most of his colleagues. Oh, they really did a good job educating up at Cornell. "I used to take the Greyhound to visit my uncle's family in Savannah," Jeff said. "Everyone there looked at us like we were freaks." "Everyone looks at me like I'm a freak," Barry said. "You kind of are a freak, Barry." Barry took that to be the highest of compliments. He was bonding with his former employee. They were going to be friends. "So, are you from around here originally?" he asked. "Yeah, I moved down here to take care of my parents." "Your parents are, I want to say, from China?" "Close enough," Jeff Park said. "My wife is Indian," Barry said. "Rock," Jeff said. "You ought to get married," Barry said, completely forgetting that his own marriage was but a team of 7 lawyers short of kaput. His instinct to help Jeff Park was overwhelming. He remembered Seema's friend, the Asian woman from Brooklyn, Tina, Lena. "I threw away my cell phone," Barry said. "Can I check something on your computer?" A laptop was provided. It had been a week since he had touched a keyboard. He brought up Seema's profile. "What a gorgeous family you have," Jeff Park said, pointing at the profile photo of Seema and Shiva. "When I worked for you, I thought you were just about to get married." "That kid of yours, those eyes." "Yeah," Barry said, his hand frozen over the keyboard. "But here's what I really wanted to show you." He scrolled through the list of Seema's friends until he found the right one. "Now, this girl is spunky," Barry said. "She called me a tool to my face." And I think she's pretty intellectual like you. Oh, one night in Brooklyn, she made these great Chinese dumplings for us. I bet your folks would love her. Mina Kim, Jeff Park read off the screen. Ah, not really up my alley. Barry was heartbroken. But she's Chinese! Jeff Park stared at him. I'm more into the Southern Belle type, he finally said. Oh, Barry said. But thanks for looking out for me. You're like that woman from Fiddler on the Roof. Barry sort of knew what he was talking about, matchmaker, whatever. Jeff Park had a wide cultural reach. Well, I'm going to make it my mission to get you married, he said. Nice guy like you. I'm not averse to the ladies, Jeff Park said. I've designed this place with them in mind. Huh, how so? Jeff Park took him on a tour, starting with a massive glass-top dining table. You see these lights, he said, pointing to a trio of Sputnik-style globes hanging over the mirrored surface. The average girl I date is 5'6", or an inch taller than the national average. I have a spreadsheet that lists the attribute of each girl I've ever dated. It's super granular. So if I'm making her dinner and she's standing there waiting for me, talking to me, maybe having a drink, the light from these lamps is directly level with her eyes. So she can see better and I can enjoy her glow. Barry was impressed by Jeff Park's thoughtfulness. A spreadsheet. The rap on guys in finance was all wrong. They cared too much. He knew he did. If you looked at it a certain way, he had abandoned his family because he didn't have the emotional bandwidth to accommodate their special needs. He examined the frigate-sized couch. This sofa is the perfect height for a 5'6" woman, Jeff said. When she sits down, the sofa waterfalls at the back of her knees. He invited Barry to sit down. You see, there's a gap of at least 3 inches between the back of your knee and the couch because you're tall. But if you were a 5'6" woman, you'd be snug. So you only date women of that height, Barry asked? Well, there's some variance, Jeff Park said. Maybe half a sigma. I don't want the tail wagging the dog, but yeah, mostly. You're a romantic, Barry said. Jeff Park shrugged and blushed. He was not unhandsome. His face was chiseled and tanned to perfection. The black athletic gear he was wearing made him look like a glossy seal in human form. Only the Rolex Sky Dweller on his wrist did not appeal to Barry's taste. Upstairs, Jeff had an airy office with full view of the Atlanta Midtown skyline and that awful Coca-Cola tower. Barry felt a twinge of passion at the sight of a fully operating Bloomberg terminal. Jeff Park only had one screen going, which was cute. On a glass board, he had sketched out some trades that appeared exceptionally long-term and cautious, making some kind of play around Alcoa and Dow. Just scanning the numbers on the board, Barry assumed an AUM, assets under management, of 35 million, which in the best of worlds brought in, what, a couple million a year? He probably had a net of just 10, 15 million. And he could live on that and be happy and buy couches that waterfall the legs of median women. I trade maybe 2 hours in the morning, Jeff Park said, and then I spend the rest of the day working on myself. They passed a formidable wall of books. I read at least 100 books a year, and if I'm at, let's say, 70 by November, I'll take the rest of the year off to catch up. I like reading to the girls I date, like, Beckett plays and Chekhov stories and Shakespeare sonnets. Believe me, they need it around these parts. Wonderful, just wonderful, Barry said. This is what I'm talking about, real self-improvement, a vocation and an avocation. So many guys say, I want to die at my peak net worth, Jeff Park said, but not me. Clearly not, Barry said. Jeff now led him into a bathroom. They were looking at the double mirrors that function as TVs in the rain shower tub. The GOP convention in Cleveland was in full blaze. Ted Cruz was saying he would not be voting for Hillary, but he wasn't going to endorse Trump either. I used to stay at the Trump Hotel in Columbus Circle whenever I visited New York, Jeff Park said. Never again. I'm a moderate Republican, Barry said, socially liberal. They went downstairs for a new course of drinks. Jeff Park was making them with ruby red vodka and Seagram soda now. They sat at a table made from the cross-section of a giant tree. Its height was also designed to seduce an average woman. Barry felt around the serrated bark of the edges. He liked his furniture slightly rustic with hints of the arts and crafts movement. That was supposed to be the motif of the Rhinebeck house if he ever finished it. Who made this? Barry asked. It's a Japanese eucalypti, Jeff Park said. I bought it in Kokura. It reminds me of how lucky I am. Kokura, Barry said. Yeah, you never heard of the luck of Kokura? Barry had not. August 9th, 1945, an American bomber was headed to bomb Kokura on the island of Tinian. But there was too much cloud cover over the city that day, so the plane was diverted to Nagasaki. Wow, Barry said, that is lucky. Right, luck. See, if I were born in Bangladesh, let's say, I don't know, to a family of rag pickers, would any of this happen? He gestured at the 4,500 square feet of property. My mother worked as a maid in Buckhead when they got here. I still remember the food stamps with the drawings of the old whiteys saying the Declaration of Independence. I memorized the words on it, U.S. Department of Agriculture food coupon. Where else could a maid's son end up like this? That's why I always take care of my folks, why I'll always live in the same town as them. I've got to honor the luck that was given me. Barry thought of his own relationship with his parents. His mother had died when he was 5, but he had brought out his father's swimming pool company for $4 million, about 10 times what it was worth, so that his dad could finally retire. But after that gesture, and after his father's openly racist behavior at his and Seema's wedding, he mostly avoided the old man. He went out just once to La Jolla, California, where his father was living with his girlfriend Netta, whom he had found in an online Zionist forum. Netta was a former social worker and had 2 grown kids in LA. The moment she met him, she pressed Barry into her freckled décolletage and proceeded to give him a detailed tour of her beautiful garden, where she and Barry's father spent most of their time drinking coffee and looking at their laptops. Her house was a 1940s U-shaped ranch, the ideal of a California ranch, with back-to-back fireplaces, wild beehives in the pepper trees, little gardens of shiso leaf and miniature roses, 2 box turtles and a rabbit named Sylvester. There were plums that Netta's kids used to throw on the street to watch them get run over, and blood orange shrubs in the front yard, and mandarins and tangerines, and green romantica rose, and pink peppercorns, and magnolia trees, and pretty and pink Indian hawthorn blossoms, and in the middle of what even the Holy Bible would have to acknowledge to be the true Garden of Eden, sat 2 elderly people in their Make America Great Again caps, silently scrolling through the latest outrage to their common gene pool in the dusty hills and valleys of another land. I'm so sorry about your son getting autism, Netta had said. Did you give him vaccines? I'm sure that's what did it. I told him not to get the vaccines, his father hollered from his perch beneath a plum tree. I sent him the link about how the Somalian Muslims were spreading it through their doctors in Minnesota. Barry was out of there in less than 36 hours. 8 months later, his father was dead of pancreatic cancer. Maybe Jeff Park was just a better son. And maybe better sons made for better people, and that was why their mom didn't die in car accidents, their faces caked in blood. But that's not luck, Barry said, returning to the theme of conversation. Sure, it's not helpful to be born to rag pickers, but most of your success was the result of your own hard work and your parents' gumption to move here. You don't consider yourself lucky, Jeff Park said. Not for a minute, Barry said. You found yourself working in the right industry at the right time, no regulation, all the leverage you could eat from the banks. I'm not even going to mention the insider trading that's just part of being in the old boys club. I don't think we're under investigation yet, Barry said, which was to say the FBI hadn't broken down their door. Hey, I'm not knocking what we do, Jeff said. It takes smarts, but so much of it is luck. You execute one good trade and people will listen to you for what you say for the next 5 years. All I know is I never had any advantages, Barry said. I wasn't even lucky enough to have been born an immigrant. Jeff Park laughed. Now that's funny, he said. They clinked glasses. After dinner, they drove to a mall in a former industrial building called Ponce City Market, which was like the Chelsea Market in New York, only it was in Atlanta. They climbed up the elevated tracks to a new park called the Beltline, which was just like the High Line in New York, only it was also in Atlanta. As they started down the rail bed, 2 women with thick Southern accents asked Jeff Park to take a photo of them with their phone. He said he would be delighted, his own accent reverting to what it must have been before Cornell sanded off the edges. The women wore very little and were almost beautiful. One of them, a tall blonde, had a cast on her leg. The other one was younger and had a goofy smile. Now, the one with the cast, she's a classic example of the Southern belle, Jeff Park said, after the women had left them. That's your type, Barry said. Should we go back after them? You could offer them a ride in your Ferrari. They'd love that. Jeff Park shrugged. I don't know, he said. Probably not. The sun was setting and the humidity was unpleasant, but Barry wanted to walk deeply into the night. There were trees and grass all around them, and sometimes a clump of skyline would come into view. So, Jeff Park said, a part of me has to ask, and I know this may not be your favorite topic. Barry got this idea that somehow Jeff Park had found out about his son's diagnosis, which was a big secret. Ask away, Barry said. What the hell happened with Value Pro? Oh, Barry said, that. Value Pro, RIP, had been a pharmaceutical company that Barry fell in love with many years ago. In fact, right after Jeff Park had been fired. He wasn't the only one, of course. Half the hedgies he knew had gone nuts for it. But Barry's erection was more pointed than the others, and it entailed at one point about half of his book. Value Pro had promised value, or per its name, value, V-A-L-U, but not to its customers who would see their pharmacy bills explode if they happened to be ill with some exotic but deadly disease of the tailbone or pudenda. No, the company promised mad value to its shareholders. And the phrase shareholder value was Barry's favorite. We are a nation of shareholders, he had said more than once to Seema, his Democrat wife, trying to articulate his brand of no-nonsense but compassionate capitalism. Several times during his Greyhound trip, Barry had paused to consider that although he loved his fellow passengers deeply, he could not trust them at the voting booth because they were not shareholders. They did not understand the thrill and the pain and the obligation of owning a part of their country. In any case, Value Pro was run by a charming alcoholic nebbish named Sammy Yuntif. Wait a second, Jeff Park said. What's a nebbish? Barry explained that it was a Yiddish term denoting a timid, submissive man. His father had hated nebbishes even more than he hated schnooks or schnorrers. Sammy Yuntif wore triple-thick frames and not so much cargo shorts as cargo pants and cargo shirts, the better to hide his pouches of fat. He twitched a lot, and he came across as the bad-breath chemistry teacher you sort of had to love back in high school if you were at all generous with your teenage heart. You're a smart guy, Sammy Yuntif had mouth-breathed the first time he met Barry. You, no value. Barry hadn't been called smart since high school. He was intrigued and wanted to hear about Value Pro's business model. Here's a business model, Yuntif said. Fuck R&D. Fuck it. We're not going to cure cancer. We're not going to save the world. We're going to deliver value to investors like you. Delivering value meant buying foreign drug companies for cheap and then using them for tax inversion purposes. Barry loved this part. His hatred of our nation's tax regime was absolute. Why not pay taxes in Ireland instead? Or why pay taxes at all? Barry adored how Yuntif cared so little about appearances, this fat, fiery, Rutgers-graduated nebbish in a cargo shirt who would probably have been forced to hang himself at Princeton. He and Seema and Yuntif's sumptuous Seema-grade Croatian girlfriend whiled away 3 days on a yacht together off of Sardinia. The nebbish and the Croat spent their time drinking caseloads of Prosecco and amiably throwing up starboard. Seema, then pregnant with Shiva, was not amused and at one point demanded a helicopter evacuate her from the carnage. This is a business of relationships, Barry kept whispering to her. Value Pro's value rocketed throughout the rest of the summer. Barry's chief investor, Ahmed of the Qatar Investment Authority, looked ready to give Barry a serious Hummer. And then it all went to shit. Someone squealed. Most of the profits were an illusion that came from buying other companies and then using every accounting trick known to man, a roll-up straight out of the Enron manual. The media and the politicians pounced on the way Value Pro had hiked up prices on some life-saving diuretic or whatnot. And the next thing Barry knew, his fiery nebbish friend had checked into rehab with a $15 million severance package. Barry's chief of staff, Sandy, had done the impossible and actually got him on the phone in rehab, but all he managed to do was croak out the single word, value. Barry wanted to stand by his friend, this guy who had accomplished so much with, socially speaking, so little. He held tight to his position, and a month later, the stock had plunged from 500 to 50. Another month later, there was no stock. I would never trade Value Pro, Jeff Park said. There was a lot of hair in that company. In fact, to be honest, I shorted it. Oh, Barry said, I thought all your trades were long-term. I couldn't help myself. That was low-hanging fruit. It was the opposite of value investing. Don't get all Warren Buffett on me, Barry said. The men walked along in silence. They were in a deeply forested part of the Beltline where the sounds and circumstances of city life were few, and for a second Barry felt they had left humanity entirely. Can I offer you just one piece of advice, Barry said, as an older person? He knew the Chinese revered their elders. You can get a better watch than a Rolex Skydweller. It looks like a Russian oligarch died on your wrist. That's not the image someone as smart as you wants to project. Jeff laughed. Ouch, he said. I guess I struck a chord with Value Pro. I'm sorry, man. Barry sighed. Why was it so hard to mentor this slender young man? All I'm saying is that you should be projecting your taste to others of your stature, not to a Southern belle in a leg cast. What's on your wrist? Jeff asked. This is an FP Journe Octa Automatique. Journe makes 900 watches a year. Rolex makes 1 million. Jeff held Barry's hand by the wrist and examined the watch. His hand was warm and dry, just like Seema's. He said. I like how the yellow gold hour and minute dials are lost in all the negative space around them. That's very cool. Thanks, Barry said. He smiled. You have very promising aesthetics. But, Jeff said, the Southern belles we just saw, they would know exactly what a Rolex is, but they would have no idea about your watch. You bought it at the airport. A Rolex of this size and weight merely announces the scale of my ambitions. I want to represent my value. But you must also own a Patek Philippe. I saw their magazine in your bathroom. I got a 1518 Perpetual in steel. Wow, Barry sighed. That rare watch was probably worth as much as Jeff's whole apartment. He wanted to feel good for this young man who was helping him out so much just when he needed it. Instead, he felt envious. No angry wife, no autistic child, no possible subpoena, just 2 good cars, a 7-figure watch, and time to read as many books as he pleased. I have a different takeaway from that Value Pro story, Jeff Parks said. They were circling back to the former industrial building that now served as a mall. You tried to make a friend who turned out to be a bad person, and when he fell, you stood by him. Yeah, but that's the kind of life lesson I should have learned by high school, Barry said. Believe me, you're not as stunted as some of the other people I've met over the years. Thank you, Barry said. I appreciate that. The Ferrari had been parked in a special VIP zone, and now a young man ran to retrieve it. They went home to examine Jeff Parks' watch collection. Thank you.